Marc Marquez has finally won a race on the Ducati, 2 races actually, but in terms of the championship, it isn't the Marquez win that has had the biggest impact, it is the Marquez crash. Pecco Bagnaia and Alex Marquez came together in the podium fight at the end of the Aragon Grand Prix. The points there are lost, everybody is thankfully unhurt, but it won't be easy to just get over this one. Will it, Simon? Because certain things have been said in the aftermath.
Yeah, Pecco Bagnaia made some fairly sharp accusations in the immediate aftermath of the crash between him and his future teammate's little brother, suggesting that essentially the crash was avoidable, that the contact between him and Alex Marquez was essentially deliberate, implied that Marquez could have done something about it, but chose not to, and said that was backed up both by what he heard on the bike in terms of Marquez refusing to back off behind him, and whenever they went and looked at the data that all the Ducati engineers share, that it also reflected that he had kept the throttle open. It was a fairly punchy comment that he made about it. It's probably the unhappiest we've seen Pecco Bagnaia that I can remember in MotoGP, and there's a real sense that this is one that's going to bubble on and on within the entire Ducati camp if he really does believe that arguably one of his championship rivals, closest friends and brother on the grid, has interfered in that battle by taking him out of Sunday's race.
Now, let's go into Alex's defense. For a bit here, there was sort of a two-part defense. The first part of Alex's assertion was that he was unaware of Bagnaia's attack coming, that Bagnaia was on the outside, so Alex's visibility is limited there. Just couldn't see him going for that same piece of the corner. And assertion number 2 was that in getting slightly ahead, Bagnaia basically pinched off his line coming out of the corner, and that's what led to the crash. That's what led to the bikes intervening. Simon, how sympathetic are you to that line from Alex?
Not particularly sympathetic, to be honest, because while this crash happened in the second of 2 corners, it was caused in the first of those corners whenever Alex Marquez ran wide. He didn't run completely off the track, but he did run off the racing line. He then, rejoined essentially as if he was alone on the track, but he just received a pit board saying that Pecco Bagnaia was, 0.2 seconds behind him as they'd crossed the line. He would have been able to hear the other bike behind him, and he still shut the door as if he was alone. I think that the reality is that yes, Bagnaia probably could have conceded it a little bit, but we're on a one-track line here because of how dirty it was in Aragon this weekend. So Bagnaia didn't have a whole lot of room to move. Marquez forced himself into a situation that was always going to be risky. I think, in part because he knew that this was his one chance to try and keep Bagnaia behind him. Bagnaia was a lot quicker than him. He'd closed him in really, really rapidly, and to be honest, it wasn't going to be a bother for Bagnaia to get past, which is why I don't actually think he was making an overtaken move at this point per se. I think that, simply Alex Marquez left the door open and he did what racers do and went through it. Probably the most telling comment for me after the race, whenever we spoke to all the MotoGP grid about their views on the crash, came from Bagnaia's close friend and fellow VR46 Academy rider Marco Bezzecchi, who said that, the only 2 ways that Marquez could not have known that Bagnaia was there was if he was either blind or deliberately didn't look. And I think that's the reality of it. If you watch back, especially from the helicopter shots, whenever they exit the corner before together, you can see that there is absolutely time for Alex Marquez to have taken a look over to his left, to have scouted out where Bagnaia was, to have realised that Bagnaia had better drive and was going to end up ahead of him. But Marquez didn't do that. He just continued as if he was alone on the circuit.
I want to bring up a part of also Alex's defense that hasn't come up yet that did resonate with me personally because I thought about it during the race. Earlier there in the race, with Alex right behind him, Jorge Martin dive-bombed Pedro Acosta into the reverse corkscrew. Neither of them made the corner. They both came out at like 10 kilometers an hour. And Alex could have tried to overtake one or both, but seemed to decide discretion is the better part of valor. I was wondering if he would bring that up as his defense and sort of indication of what he expected Pecco to do, and he did. I think there is probably a point to it. Now, as you mentioned, there were some strong opinions in the paddock. Overall, it's been split. Online opinion has certainly been split, as far as we can tell, and the stewards have ruled no further action. Both Pecco and Alex were at the stewards to give their opinions, but they weren't there at the same time. They did apparently talk it out afterwards, if we found out from an Alex Marquez statement. Statement goes, "The most important thing for me is the conversation I had yesterday with Pecco, and from my side, the issue is settled." Now, Simon, let's go on a slight tangent here. You're a regular in the paddock, you do every race. Maybe there's a perception from the outside, but from the inside, how real is the divide between the Marc Marquez camp and the Valentino Rossi camp? Valentino Rossi, of course, being Pecco Bagnaia's mentor.
I mean, it's still very real. There's still a huge amount of dislike between Marquez and Rossi. I think, to be fair to the Marquez side of the camp, mainly from the Rossi camp, it's still that's still where the bitterness comes from. And I think if Marc Marquez could now draw a line under whatever happened in the last two races of 2015 and never talk about it again, he would. But it seems like, Valentino Rossi doesn't want to let that go. We've seen conflict before between the riders that he mentors and Marc Marquez. I think most recently, whenever Marco Bezzecchi kind of tried to instigate a little bit of a row with Marquez at the end of last season. We saw more recently Rossi, making some sort of sniping comments about Marc Marquez's promotion into Factory Ducati, which you got to think he's going to be a little bit upset about, given that he went there and never achieved anything of note, and it looks like Marquez is in a position to do something much better with it. And that filters down to the Academy guys. There's no love lost. Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia will be professionals next season when they're teammates, and they will work together. There's, because they are both level-headed people, but there is still this undercurrent of bitterness that has never really gone away, and every time it looks like it might go away, something like this happens, and we're back to square one again.
Now, it's also worth mentioning that, of course, Alex is his own man, but Alex and Marc, very, very close, and Alex has already had his major disagreement with Pecco earlier this season at Mugello over whether or not Pecco impeded him unnecessarily. Although compared to this, obviously that was nothing, but it fits into a wider pattern. Now, we should not let this all completely overshadow Marc's excellent double, but it is also Marquez winning at Aragon. Simon, what does that win tell us?
I mean, Marc Marquez's win told us some things, but it didn't tell us the whole story, Val. I think that, coming into this season, we expected that there would be 3 circuits that he would have a very, very strong chance of winning. One was the Circuit of the Americas earlier in the season, but a little bit too early in the season for Marquez because he still hadn't completed his Ducati adoption. The second one was the Sachsenring round, his favourite in the German Grand Prix, but with a series of complications over that weekend, it just didn't work out for him. The third was always Aragon, and he didn't fail to deliver on it this time, but it did take things going his way a little bit to kind of leave him in a position to be able to take that win, even if the weekend was pretty dominant. I think what we're seeing is someone who is able to overcome the difficulties of the GP23 versus the GP24 that Bagnaia and Martinez on at some circuits just through sheer will of talent. But there's still other places where that's not happening. I won't be surprised if he wins again this season, because I think there's other places where things can work into his favour and deliver good results for him. But the real takeaway from this weekend for me in terms of Marquez's performance is that it just bodes really, really well for next year. This is something that makes it look like Marc Marquez can be a genuine, strong title contender from the opening round next season, based on, a very healthy reminder that he still has all that talent that we always knew he did.